Hello, Colorado Realtors. I'm Scott Peterson, and thank you for joining me for another edition of Legal Bites. So in today's edition, we're going to be talking about what is a perpetually hot topic, I feel like, in Colorado. It's been an issue around for a lot of years, and primarily in a hot seller's market, it becomes that much more of an issue, and that is coming soon listings. Still to this day, I get questions frequently whenever I'm in front of any group. Legal hotline questions certainly come in. And I know that there's some confusion and frustration. Primarily the questions come from buyer agents or buyer representatives that get frustrated that properties languish around as a coming soon listing for a little bit longer than they think is appropriate. So my question is, or my answer to the question is, are they appropriate? It's yes, maybe no. The real answer is maybe. And we'll explain kind of why that's my answer on if they're appropriate or not. But it has been a long-standing issue. The Division of Real Estate issued, and I'd encourage all of you to read Commission Position Statement number 44 a couple of years ago related to coming soon listings, trying to provide some guidance, but hopefully I can kind of cover most of that in this episode of Legal Bites. Those look like awfully eager beaver sellers there in that picture. They frighten me a little bit with the wide eyes and eager willingness to sell their house. But in any event, what is a coming soon listing? So a coming soon listing is often, traditionally, is going to be a situation where a listing broker will enter into a listing agreement with the seller, and then they'll put a sign in the yard and probably some sort of a rider on top of that sign that says coming soon. You see them more and more around town, oftentimes on fix and flips, maybe where a house is going to be rehabbed. They'll come out a little bit earlier with a coming soon listing, but in other cases as well where maybe a house isn't being rehabbed. So what's happening there? Sometimes the seller is interested in potentially just having their agent, their listing agent, do a direct deal with a buyer and possibly save some money in a variable commission structure. Other times a listing agent is interested in doing a direct deal with a buyer, so they make a little bit more money than they would in a co-op transaction. And the distinction there is what really makes a difference from at least the division's eyes in terms of whether or not that's going to be acceptable. So looking to basically double in the deal. And you got to always remember that the Division of Real Estate, the Real Estate Commission, they don't oversee sellers, right? They're a licensing agency, and they oversee you as real estate licensees, as realtors in the state of Colorado. They ultimately have jurisdiction over you, but they don't have jurisdiction over the sellers, meaning they can't really take a position and tell a seller that coming soon listings aren't acceptable, but in certain situations they can tell you that they are. So let's back up a little bit and talk about license law and kind of how the Division of Real Estate analyzes coming soon complaints. All right, so as a seller's transaction broker, it's important for you to understand that license law requires you, even as a transaction broker, to provide or to exercise reasonable skill and care on behalf of your seller. All right, if you're working as a seller's agent, then you have to provide reasonable skill and care on behalf of your seller, plus you need to promote the seller's interest in good faith, loyalty, and fidelity. Those are kind of the fiduciary obligations that you have if you're acting in the capacity of seller's agent. In either case, though, you have to offer that baseline reasonable skill and care on behalf of your seller client. And that's how they end up approaching complaints related to coming soon listings. All right? So you have to consider, as you're contemplating or discussing a coming soon listing with your seller client, what's the motivation there? All right? Consider your motivations in relation to the seller's motivation. If the motivation is you're considering putting a home on the market for some period of time prior to listing it on the MLS and essentially creating a coming soon listing, if the motivation for doing that is for you as the agent to double in the deal or to obtain some benefit or some financial windfall as a result of doing that, then very likely you've got a problem there if there's a complaint and that complaint is ultimately investigated by the Real Estate Commission, okay? Because from their perspective, based on the fact that you would be offering a more limited audience of potential buyers by not listing it in the MLS, you're probably not advising your seller in that case with reasonable skill and care. You're not offering them your duty of reasonable skill and care in analyzing the best possible or most likely scenario for creating a lot of potential buyers for that property, right? On the other hand, if your seller is in a situation, and I think I mentioned maybe a fix and flip situation where they want to get some exposure to the property, let people know that it's going to be on the market in the next couple of months, but the house clearly isn't ready to be put on the market, or it's maybe there's a lot of cleanup to do or a lot of touch-up kind of work to do. It's not a fix and flip. Maybe it's got some minor updating. And there's some legitimate reasons that a seller is going to say, listen, I'd like to get some initial exposure, put a sign in the yard, let's say it's coming soon, and it's going to benefit the seller by having that. In that case, a coming soon listing is probably perfectly acceptable in the division's eyes, again, based on the fact that you're going to be having this discussion with them related to the more limited exposure that it's going to get, because it's not going to appear in the MLS, it's not going to appear in some of the syndication sites, and it's not going to be as more broadly received by the public, but it will be potentially seen in a high traffic neighborhood or by people walking by or driving by that happen to want to be in the neighborhood. So that's the distinction there, and that's really the important thing that you need to understand, that is, as part of your duty of reasonable care to your client, you have to let them know that that limited marketing that you're going to be doing might have a negative impact. And conversely, if your seller is approaching you and saying, I want a coming soon listing, and this is why I want it, because I need to do some more work to the house, or we need to wrap things up, but I want some early exposure, and let's see kind of what's out there, then in the division's eyes, that's probably going to be just fine because it's being driven by and benefiting the seller. Okay? So that's the distinction. You have to look to your motivation in doing that. In terms of some best practices, either way, you want to be memorializing. It's got to be memorialized in writing with the seller. And the best way you're going to do that is right there in the additional provisions of the listing agreement to say something to the effect that seller's instructing the broker to list the property for a period of 10, 15, 20, 30, however many days as a coming soon listing, and after that point in time, it would be listed in the MLS, so that there's good hard written evidence that your seller's the one driving the coming soon discussion. Remember, as an overall threshold, it always has to be in your seller's best interest. Hopefully that clears up some questions that I get often on coming soon listings. As always, if you have additional questions, the Car Legal Hotline is available from 9 to 12 and 1 to 4, Monday through Friday. And we're always happy to talk to employing brokers and their designees within an office to answer any questions like this or clarify other things related to any legal or risk management topics. So thank you again for joining us for another edition of Legal Bites, and we'll see you next time.